It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Oh boy, we've had a week or two, have we not? Things have been wild, they've been intense. I told you it was coming. And June's just around the corner. Can you believe we're halfway through the year already? And I would love to tell you things are going to slow down, but they're just going to start getting faster. Partly because Jupiter is now in Gemini and the energy is speeding up. Gemini is air energy. It's fast, it's quick, it's curious. And it is also going to be influencing Jupiter, the planet of expansion and belief, in some interesting ways. And we've already seen kind of a precursor as Gemini season got off to a start with the Vatican making some announcements. And I'll be talking about that on the podcast because it has very much to do with 2025. And speaking of which, I've got my 2025 Year Ahead seminar coming up June 22nd. And patrons, you've got 50% off when you book before May 31st. I might still keep that open to some tiers, but the general discount for patrons is over May 31st. So grab your spot because there's limited spots in that event. Yeah. So you may have experienced a thing or three and are looking for things to quiet down. I think on an emotional level, things may not be as wild this week. Not as wild as we go through things. But we will see world events heat up. And this couldn't be weather. I think we're going to see some big storms coming in. Especially as the moon hits Aquarius, because it's going to be right on top of Pluto, trining off with Jupiter. And I think we could see some bigger tornadoes. I know we've seen a lot of them. We could see I think we're going to see a lot of things happen with missiles and bombs and drones. I think things will intensify even further in Gaza. I think we're going to see some stuff happen in Eastern Europe. Things are heating up. Things are heating up, and the energy is going to continue to build in intensity throughout the summer. I wish I had better news. If you want to know how to use this Jupiter and Gemini energy to your advantage, because all is not lost, my friends, there's still things we can do. Remember, the whole world can be looking like it's going to hell in a handbasket, and you can have a really good day. Okay. And so I did a presentation at the beginning of May to prep you for Jupiter and Gemini, and it's called Big Think. It's called Big Think. It is available to patrons for free. And if you are not a patron and you just want to check it out, you can grab it in the Patreon shop. But it is free if you are a patron. And it's a lot of information about Jupiter and Gemini. It's going to be interesting, my friends. We still have Mars in Aries, so it's really easy to kind of act on impulse. Okay. It's still really easy to act on impulse. And you want to watch it. It's easy to get grouchy and lose your temper or do something without thinking. It's important to take a deep breath and ground yourself and connect in. If you're in the mystery school, I did a meditation for you last week. And also I did a class as well on explaining how the mystery school curriculum helps you with your energy centers and knowing when one is overstimulated or understimulated and what the symptoms are and how the curriculum kind of meets the needs of people, because we're not taught this stuff growing up. We're not taught how to manage our own energy, our own consciousness, and that it is a mind-body-spirit connection. It is a mental, physical connection. And then the spiritual connection could come in, but we've got to get these things under some kind of order You don't have to be rigorous. I think a lot of times people take it to the extremes. They go overly on, my body is my temple and go really, really deep into that. Or they can get really, really cerebral. And both of those things lead to under and overdevelopment. And that's why I created a process in the mystery school that helps you kind of move through things. So there's all of that. We had a lot of new patrons this week, so patron shoutouts are going to be long. That's exciting, and I'm going to be opening up a new astrology tier at the 1st of June. I'll talk about that. The Astrology Club, so where we can just kind of kick back and talk astrology. It's a formal curriculum. It's just going to be hanging back and talking astrology, guys. I've got a lot of classes to teach, so this is going to be just informal, but a good place to talk about it. So grab your coffee, grab your tea. If you're in the car and we're driving to work, I know it's Memorial Day, but if you're working, then we're off to work together. And if you're off and you're enjoying a well-deserved day off, then just sit back and relax. Keep your eye on the weather, because I think we're going to see some interesting weather this Monday and Tuesday. I'll talk a little bit about June. The Awake Space Astrology magazine is coming out June 2nd. So patrons at the $15 level and above will be getting that. And I've decided to give a little extra perk in the $15 level, where I will be reading out what's in the headlines just to that. So there'll be a part 2 to the podcast that goes out just to the $15 level and up. This seems fair. You guys put so much into everything. So there's that. So let's see. Making all kinds of changes. Changes. And speaking of changes, changing some of the formatting in the magazine, getting it shaped up. I think this might be like the final form. We'll find out. You never know with me. I change stuff up. I get woolly hairs. I make changes. So that's fun. I'm keeping personal readings up, so through the end of May, and then I'm going to close them. So if you were wanting to get a personal reading with me, which is a natal chart reading, you need to get that booked in. Just giving you all my news and announcements before we start talking about religion, because Jupiter's in Gemini, and what that means for 2025. Because remember, we've got the 2025 year ahead. I talked about that a little bit. Yeah. So get your stuff together and get ready for an interesting episode as I talk about what I think we were going to see this week. I will say, as June comes around, Donald Trump isn't going to be real thrilled. He does not have the best of birthdays. Okay. He does not have the best of solar returns. And he does not have a good time. And I did a live event with patrons this last week on the 23rd, where I looked at Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Samuel Alito, the Supreme Court Justice, at what they can expect. And it's interesting. So it's the new pin post. So I replaced last year's pin post with this one. With the new Trump update. It's pretty much the same as what I saw, last year. He's not in great shape. Okay. I'm not sure if he goes to jail or not. I'm not sure he lives long enough. He might live long enough, but he's certainly not going to be president. There's no indication of that. I will say Joe Biden does have the more likely transits. I'm not convinced that something doesn't happen to him also, given his age. So, but he has better transits and a better solar return than Trump does. And you can check that out if you're a patron. You can go find the pin post and watch that. So Again, I can't believe how many patrons we got this week. Just a whole bunch of you joined up. Welcome. Because so many new people joined, I'm going to do some walkthrough videos to help orient you around how we use Patreon. Because instead of using Discord now, we're using the Patreon chat. And it's actually a lot easier. People are having a much easier time navigating it and finding things. So I'll do some screenshots and show you how to use it if you've been confused, because you can use it on the desktop or you can use it on the cell phone, your smartphone, a tablet. I don't have a tablet. I have a phone. I have a computer. I'll do it on that. So there's that. That's all the housekeeping. So what do I think is going to happen this week? Well, I think things are going to heat up. We're already seeing things go on in Rafah. I don't think that's going to diminish anytime soon. I think we're going to see a lot more use of missiles and drones. I think we're going to see stuff coming out of the Red Sea. I think things are going to really heat up in the Straits of Taiwan. I think we're going to see things happen in the Persian Gulf, also known as the Arabian Gulf, depends on where you live, on how you call that. Hurricane-wise, weather-wise, I think we're going to see a bunch of stuff happen in off the Atlantic coast, in the Gulf of Mexico, possibly Central and Northern South America. I think we might hear more about glaciers melting in Antarctica. That is looking dicey, and that is part of my prediction for the end of this year. I was, talking about in late 2024 or early 2025, like the first week of January, we could hear about a sheet of ice detaching or melting to raise sea levels in 2025. And I'm actually also looking at October for that one, because October is wild, and I've been preparing people for October of 2024. I'm going to continue sounding an alarm on that one, not to be alarmist, but rather to say, hey, you need to be ready for some pretty big natural events as well as human events, because it is just very, very volatile. So, and there's a lot of water involved. And so this could be hurricanes, it could be typhoons, it could be, cyclones, it could be water spouts, it could be earthquakes in the ocean that cause tidal waves, tsunamis. It could be ice melting, raising sea levels. I think that's going a lot faster than the news once reported, and I kind of keep my eye on scientific journals when it comes to that. So we're not talking about eons or hundreds of years or even 20 years on some of this stuff. It's starting to melt really, really fast. So just keeping your eye on things would be really, really good. And of course, DeSantis is trying to make talking about climate change illegal, because, that's what he does. Now, we do have a global audience. So what else is going to happen out in the world? I think there's going to be more news out of Iran. I think there's going to be more stuff going down with Iran. Because here's some stuff coming out of Eastern Europe, former Soviet republics like Georgia. I think we could see more assassination attempts, but maybe using drones. I think that could be a potential. I think that's also a little more likely, like on the 31st as well. I think we could see some assassination attempts. But I'll talk about that when I talk about what's up in the headlines. So how do you deal with all of this, right? How do you deal with all the stuff that's going on? It is really overwhelming. And some of the news is designed to keep you on high alert. Some of the news, and I'm not talking about on social media with citizen journalism trying to help people become aware that all is not as it appears in the news. It feels almost like things are on a knife's edge. And I always say Gemini is a little stabby. And why is Gemini stabby? Well, Gemini rules the hands, and what do we hold a knife with? We hold a knife with the hands. And this is going to continue to get a little stabby. And people may stab with words. People may have a lot of very strong opinions they're putting forth over the next week or so, especially as Jupiter's in trine with Pluto. Thankfully, Pluto's retrograde. That gives us that chance to prepare. That helps. But what do? If your mind is running 1,000,000 miles an hour, if your mind is overstimulated, if you're feeling emotionally tapped out, I know so many of you are tired. Everybody's tired. Everybody is. Everybody is tired of uncertainty. Our security is at risk. And that doesn't just mean, a lot of times when people think about security, they think about military stuff. They think about, are our borders secure? Is it safe to walk down the street? And those are very primal forms of security. But, economically, you go to the grocery store and you're like, oh my God, why does bread cost almost $10? Why do eggs cost, the mortgage? How do I deal with this? It's time to get clever. It is time to get creative and inventive. And it is not necessarily the time to lean into what isn't going right, what isn't going your way. I get concerned when people are attached to the idea of dream jobs or dream relationships, dream fantasies. Okay. Fantasies. Because, and I know, I always tell you, worry is a misuse of imagination. But there is a certain amount of realism. Like, why is it a dream? Is it a dream because it gives you a certain kind of status? Is it a dream because it makes you acceptable and you've won the day? Is it some kind of universal brownie button that you're hoping for? And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just asking, famous last words, right? Just asking. But what is it that is prompting you to put so much of your self-esteem and self-worth into something when we have right now with Mercury and Taurus, the question really needs to be, how do I keep myself afloat? How can I be more comfortable? Is it really the title? Is it really, even if you're in the activist space, is it really being able to rally all the people because you can see the vision? Or is it just finding ways to work with people to get through the day? Is it a way to develop communication lines that make things more stable? Okay. You never know. So how do you deal with all of this? Well, it's important to ground, my friends. It's important to ground. It's essential, to be honest, as we move forward. And it's going to be a little harder to ground once Mercury gets closer in to Uranus this week. Mercury, all through this week, is approaching Uranus, and I think we could see some really interesting accidents. I think we could see some telecommunications failures, satellite failures. We've seen a lot of meteorites, and I thought that was really fascinating. I think we might see more of those, more meteorites zooming through, lights in the sky. We could see that. And so we need to change how we think about things if we want to have any kind of security or stability, and understand that we create that for ourselves. It's an inside job. It really is. And panic doesn't serve us. And I understand having anxiety. I lived with it for a very long time. And earning my peace within took a really, really long time and a lot of work, to the point where Not a whole lot gets me anymore. Some stuff does. Some stuff does. But not a whole lot. So it's really, really important to take deep breaths. Meditate in a way that works for you. Some people, it's a guided meditation. Some people, it's an active meditation, like going for walks or washing dishes, folding towels, crochet, knitting, sewing, cooking, gardening, doing something that's somewhat repetitive, learning to slow the mind down. Okay. And you can. Is it hard? Yes. No one said it was going to be easy. Okay. Things take time to get good at. It takes practice. Okay. And you have to experiment sometimes to know what works for you and what doesn't. But if we focus on what's unbearable, it makes life very hard to live. Okay. Now, one of the things I thought was really interesting last week was the Vatican making some rules around miracles, visions, quote unquote supernatural or mystical experiences. They've changed things up in advance of 2025. 2025 is a Jubilee year, according to the church. Now, I was not raised Catholic, but a lot of people were. And it is pervasive in our culture because it's often used in movies and television. And it has infiltrated a lot of spirituality because, especially things that came out of the Rosicrucians and Hermeticism and even Gnosticism had an influence because people will move from or move within belief systems, but not unpack them entirely. And they kind of bring things with them. So if you've left a religion of any kind, and you haven't unpacked your value systems, why you believe certain things are a certain way, why you feel, guilt, blame, and shame around things, or why you, feel an over-attachment to virtue, because I always say that's one of the greatest shadows, the need to be virtuous, okay, to be seen as virtuous, to be afraid of being seen as fallible and human and, worried people will judge you as a sinner. If you don't deconstruct that and reconstruct it, you just bring stuff along with you for the ride. And so I found it interesting because metaphysically and theosophically, 2025 is a really big year. They've been talking about it for almost 200 years. And I found it very interesting that the Vatican would make some rules around miracles and visions because 2025 is kind of a hotbed of metaphysical activity if we read everything right. No, it is not the beginning of the age of Aquarius. If I have to say it again, Pluto entering Aquarius had nothing to do with the age of Aquarius. Pluto in Capricorn didn't usher in the Pluto and Capricorn did not usher in the Capricorn age. Nor did Sag. No. Pluto it doesn't spend that long in a sign. And a planetary age, or the precession of the equinoxes, each sign represented there. It's a 2,500 year period. And I belong to the camp that believes that, mid 19th century with factories and what have you, that the age of Aquarius may have started. It takes a long time to get going. You have to end one, begin another. It isn't a cutoff line. It's not cut and dried. And this is in some of the deeper metaphysical literature. It's heavy reads. But I've got a news article up that I'd love to read and talk about when it comes to Jupiter and Gemini. This is like right down the line on this one. I found it fascinating. So this comes from theconversation.com and it says The Vatican is cracking down on miracles. Here are the new rules for supernatural occurrences, which I'm going to say a lot of the supernatural is not super. It's not outside of nature. It's part of nature, just like human beings are. We are not separate from nature. We are part of nature. So, new norms for differentiating supernatural phenomena from the natural within Roman Catholicism took effect on May 19th. The new norms arise from the need to evaluate as quickly as possible the supernatural origin or otherwise of an array of phenomena occurring increasingly within the Catholic world and spreading quickly via social media. Possible supernatural phenomena include apparitions, especially of Jesus or the Virgin Mary, interior or exterior voices, writings, or messages from the beyond, the weeping or bleeding of sacred images, the bleeding of consecrated Eucharist hosts, and so on. Visions of the Virgin Mary in particular continue to occur regularly within Catholic Christendom. The new documents neither endorse supernatural phenomena nor reject them. Rather, it provides a set of criteria and processes by means of which the Church can officially discriminate between them and separate the authentic from the fake. So what do we need to know about these norms? An old document replaced. The supernatural is now under new management. The new document is intended to more effectively oversee validation of such events. It does so by centralizing authorization, management, and control of the supernatural within the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, better known as the Inquisition. I have not read this full article before. Oh, God, the Inquisition, really? No one ever expects it. That's a Monty Python line. Any decision bishops and any other authority wish to make has to be submitted to the dicastery for approval. The new document declares the Holy Spirit may reach our hearts through certain supernatural occurrences, such as an apparition or visions of Christ or the Blessed Virgin. But the central authority of the Church will now decide where and how God works, his wonders or miracles to perform. Overall, God will be shown to be minimally directly intervening in the world. 6 new criteria to judge whether God is involved. I love how everybody loves to have the answers, right? Rather than a relatively simple judgment whether an event is supernatural or not, the Church now provides 6 possible ways an event can be classified. These range from, I think it's nihil, obstat. I'm not great at my Latin anymore. Nothing stands in the way, to declaratio de non supernaturalitate, declaration of non-supernaturality. Can't speak English today either. But even where a nihil obstat is granted, as a rule, neither a diocesan bishop nor any conference of bishops nor the dicastery itself will declare that these phenomena are of supernatural origin. In short, a clear declaration of a supernatural event having taken place will virtually never happen, or at least until the Pope intervenes. A declaration of non-supernaturality will be made if it is discovered. So it could be basically just, in short, if it's a fake or a hoax is discovered. Between these 2 extremes lie 4 other possible judgments. Although there are positive signs of divine action in each of these, they each indicate increasing worries about credibility. The first 2 of these concerns increasing doubts about the credibility of the phenomena. The next 2 concern increasing doubts about the honesty of the people involved. What are the new procedures? If a diocesan bishop, after consultation, believes a supernatural phenomenon requires investigation, he alerts the dicastery or the Inquisition. He then convenes an investigatory commission to carry out a trial. This trial will see witness examinations, sworn depositions, expert analysis of written texts, along with technical, scientific, doctrinal, and canonical assessment. It's pretty much the traditional method of the Inquisition in modern dress or vestments. Let's hope it doesn't involve garroting people. The commission finally makes a judgment on the truth of the matter based on a positive and negative criteria. Positive criteria includes the reputation of persons involved, doctrinal orthodoxy, exclusion of fakery, and the fruits of Christian life that have resulted from it. Negative criteria include the possibility of manifest error, potential doctrinal errors, breeding of divination within the church. Breeding of division, not divination, breeding of division within the church, an overt pursuit of profit, power, fame, or social recognition, and the personal and public ethical rectitude of those involved along with their mental health. Okay, so this is where we get the whole, you don't charge for your gifts. It comes from the church because they want to be the only game in town. Okay, it's competition for the coffers, folks. Just saying. I don't know if you've ever been to the Vatican, but it is not a minimalist space. Just saying. Just saying. Just saying. In light of the commission's work, the bishop proposes to the dicastery a judgment following one of the 6 ways of classification. The dicastery then makes a final judgment to be delivered to the bishop, who is obliged to implement the decision and make it public. Catholicism disenchanting the world. There is deep concern within the Vatican over misinformation and disinformation about the supernatural, which I honestly, if you've ever seen anything on social media, me too, there is concern because there's a whole lot of stuff out there. The digital world is a place of multiple meanings where the supernatural occupies a space somewhere between reality and unreality. Well, isn't that the supernatural in general? It is a domain where belief is a matter of choice and disbelief is willingly and happily suspended. Meh. Ironically, the outcome of the new norms will be to minimize the number of phenomena recognized as supernatural within the Catholic Church. In effect, it will put stricter limits on God's actions in the world. Okay, so you have a bunch of people who believe in a deity that controls traffic, but now they're saying it doesn't control traffic as much as previously thought. Okay, this is so Jupiter and Gemini. Okay, the new norms within the church to manage the supernatural are intended to disenchant the world than to further enchant it. That is interesting. It's fascinating to me. I am slightly amused by this, so they're trying to say, hey, stuff isn't as mystical. And it's probably because of conspiracy theories, I'm sure there's some of that. But, demystifying the world, huh? I found this really interesting ahead of 2025 because in 2025, according to theosophical literature, it's supposed to be kind of a big year for it, where people may have more visions, may have more connection with, let's say, parallel dimensions, different forms of reality. And we're also going to have, a lot of interesting natural events. It's a big year for weather. It's a big year for natural events. And in that, there's going to be some divine intervention, however you want to view the divine. I make fun of organized religion pretty equally, because I find it dislikes what I do because it's competition. It's like, you charge for your work. I'm like, I do not have marble hallways. I do not have ermine robes. I don't. Maybe I should. I don't have a bunch of funny hats either. Maybe I should get some of those. It's interesting what we consider valid and not valid when it comes to beliefs. So I think we're going to see a lot of discussions around that. You can believe whatever you want to believe. I always tell people, I'm not here to tell you how to believe. I'll say how I believe. You don't have to believe the same as me. In fact, I really don't want people believing the same as me at all. At all. Not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Yeah, you can believe very differently than me. But I find it very fascinating they've got new rules coming ahead of 2025. It's as I prepare to do the seminar. And remember, I do it twice a year. So everybody who signs up in June gets access to the recording at the least, to the one that I do in the fall, where I give a closer to the fact update. I'll probably do it in December again. I'm not sure how I'll feel in November, given personal transits. Yeah. So I think we're going to see a massive unfolding. I think I told you guys we'd see a massive awakening this year, and I think we really have. Political, religious, people questioning their beliefs. It's easy to be mad at things. It really is. It's easy to be mad at me, like, I got lied to. I've been there. But is it really going to be helpful? I just think being thoughtful. I think with Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini, and Venus is in Gemini, it's a real good time to be thoughtful and ask ourselves some gentle questions about, instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, like, what else can I do? How else can I look at this? How can I explore this? How can I explore my faith, my beliefs, my wonderings, whether it's political, religious, what have you? Like, what really matters? One of my favorite historical figures, and you have to remember, I wasn't raised Catholic, but one of my favorite historical figures is the Catholic saint, Saint Teresa of Avila. Mostly because at the time, during the Spanish Inquisition, she pissed off the Pope and lived. And that just makes my contrary heart happy. And one Catholic historian described her as, she wasn't your ordinary saint. She did things that would make your eyelashes curl. And I can't remember where that article is, but it made me laugh. She got really bugged by having visions, and she had a lot of them. And she was kind of a baller. She is a feminist icon, and I found her, oh gosh, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s. Her name came up in some circles I was hanging out in. I decided to investigate her. I was like, oh wow, I can jive with that. I see that. Because I've had a lot of metaphysical experiences in my own life, and I often found them to be a distraction or something that, it was like, okay, great. How is this helping? Okay, proof that there's more than I can see. That's great. I have kid stories. I have, mouths to feed. I have things to do. Make it practical or bugger off. That was kind of where I was at. I think a lot of times we seek solace and comfort. And in my experience, it is always there. We're just not always able to receive it. Because if we're in despondency or feeling isolated or feeling alone and hard done by, it's hard to feel that support that is there incorporeally, whether it's from your spirit guides, or your ancestors, or, whoever it is. Whoever is there comforting you. Some people think of it as angels or ascended masters or whatever you want to call it. So, are they all different? Technically, in metaphysical terms, but, take the support and encouragement where you can get it. So I think with this week coming up, just do a segue. With this week coming up, it's important to get your feet in the ground. It's important to just kind of take it day by day. Stop trying to, like, even if you're preparing, okay, for the fall and winter, it's going to the grocery store, grabbing extra cans of beans, getting some dried lentils, making sure you have, if you eat rice, having the rice, making sure you have flour. You don't have to spend your whole wad on supplies. Get a little extra each time. Okay. Make sure you have things for water storage. Water is going to play a really big role coming up. That's going to be really, really big. So there's that. I think it's time for some patron shoutouts. Because without patrons, we don't have a podcast. Without patrons, we don't have a podcast. And this week's Patreon podcast, I will read out the headlines. Give that out there just to remind you guys, and maybe a couple articles. I had a request there. So I'm going to do some patron shout outs, and then I'm going to read some Q&A from patrons as well in this episode, because patrons get to submit their questions to the Googly sheet. And sometimes I read them on here. Sometimes I do it in the Q&A only for patrons, which I'll do that as well this week. But we'll do the part 2 for this podcast because it's already getting pretty long. We'll do the part 2 for patrons. I'll read a couple of the articles from the magazine from May, and then I'll give you what to expect in the headlines as well, thanks to patron requests for a little bit of special audio. I'll do that. I don't know what you guys think about the sound quality, but I'm loving it. I set up for stereo. Thanks to Steve of Finland, who made the request, and call me dumb. But I was like, I can't get it to record in stereo. Yeah, because I only had one mic set up. Do I have 2 mics? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Do I have a sound interface that I can plug both into and do stereo sound? Yes, I can. So let me know if you like the sound. I enjoyed it on the playback. What the heck, Laurie? Wild. It's just wild. I don't know what to do with myself. Seriously. Like, what was I thinking? All right. We're going to do patron shoutouts. All right, you heard the music. You know what time it is. It is time for patron shoutouts. Okay. It is crazy. So I do our newest patrons who are paid members. Newest patrons who are paid members. So we've got Robin, Jackie, Ashley, Jessica, Julie, Kelly, Mary, Nancy, Christy, Lori. Who do you spell your name the same as me? Mikey, Sarah, Katie, Danielle, Layla, Jeremy, Gail, Patricia, Dee Dee Capone, Kevin, Katrina, Lenora, a furry woodland creature. I love you for that. Shane, Psychic Medium, Diana, Haley Morris, Kristen, Julie, Jonathan, Sarah, Leslie, Kate, Judith Resist, Robin, Heather, Sherry, Chris, Lindsay, Lisa, Melody, Desiree, Evan, Julie, Sharon, Lisa, Amanda, Bree, Greta, Jennifer, Caitlin, Carrie, April, Amy, Ray, Marissa, Jessica, Saul, Michelle, Stephanie, Kelly, Sue, Jess, Sylvia, Lila, Francesca, Mary, Kin Finn, Laura, Becca Lynn, Loremaster 3000, Jesse, Banana, Aaron, and Allison. Welcome. And to all of the free patrons, we had 102 of you join this week. Welcome as well. Because of patrons like you, we stay ad-free, and I am able to create the awesome content you get to find on Patreon and here at the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. Thank you. Remember, you get your special discounts. There's discounts on readings. I will get those in a post up tomorrow just so you can take advantage of those if you miss those posts. Oh, wow. Wow. Which, by the way, just to explain, I'm closing personal/natal readings on May 31st. That doesn't mean you can't book them out on my calendar. Okay, so you can book it out. That's fine. But the discount ends on May 31st. Just to be clear, because sometimes people get confused by that. Honestly, don't know any other way to explain it. I've tried. I don't know. It could be me. Doesn't mean it's you. Okay. So I hope that made sense. Cosmic Surfers, we're going to be meeting on Saturdays. Cosmic Surfers, we're going to meet on Saturdays. We're talking about it in the chat on Patreon. So if you're a Cosmic Surfer, and this is kind of professional development, looking at if you have a creative business, if you have, if you want to take your astrology a little deeper and use it in, your profession, or if you want to set, if you're looking at setting up practices, it's not just astrology. I mean, we're going to talk astrology, but it would also just be if you're a creative or intuitive or a woo-woo business owner. And this is just, kind of like a group coaching session where we talk about stuff, support each other, help each other make it through. That's going to be at the Cosmic Surfers level. And then if people are wanting more hands-on help on getting their businesses started, I'm looking at creating like a coaching program around that. Trying to decide, because it takes a lot of work on my end to help you guys get set up. And so I'm trying to look, where's my schedule? What's my time looking like? So hold tight. That's something I'm working on. Let us do the next thing, my friends. Thank you for becoming patrons. I'll give a little overview of June, because June starts on Friday. I know, what the hell, right? June starts on Friday, and I'll give a little overview of June, and then I'll answer some patron questions in the next segment. This is what I wrote back in June, and then I touched up a bit in December of last year. So we can expect to see a lot of direct action globally. People are forming in groups, activism, and communicating demands grows in volume. So things are going to get loud. People are really not okay. And when we look at what's going on, like just the weekend, when we saw what happened in Gaza, that may get people, because again, people in all countries are looking, especially in Western countries, are looking at the services they used to have being depleted, their taxes going up, inflation being up, issues with housing, food, water, etc. The demands of climate change are up. And so I think we're going to see more and more people hitting the streets. And again, when I did the event with Matilda and I took a look at Germany, I think we're going to see Germans in the streets, especially over what? I don't know. I'm not into German politics, but people are hitting the streets, and I think things are going to get a little stabby. We could see issues in Russia or with Russia once Jupiter ingresses into Gemini, and the United States, and in the United States, things might get a little stabby too. Could happen in a lot of Western countries. Okay. And by stabby, I mean like physical violence. End of June talk turns to it's the economy and could have real inflation numbers released. Weather is seasonally unusual, with temperatures either extreme and hot or cold. Could see more tornadoes, hurricanes, and or flooding, or could see droughts, dust, sandstorm, depends on where you live in the world. Increased in hacking, discussions of missile defense systems, and expansion of regional conflicts. Push against social media continues, and there could be accidental issues with servers and internet cables. That's interesting, because that was not the threat back when I wrote this. So the Houthis might be at those cables again. But we could also see issues with satellites. And I think we could see a big incident with satellites. So get ready for internet disruptions, cell phone disruptions, etc. We could see grassroots and popular movements continue to grow. Unemployment is high globally. Issues in the tech sector will continue. Debates around AI and faulty infrastructure plague seated incumbents. So remember, it's an election year in a lot of places. We've got a general election called for July for Great Britain. Rishi Sunak doesn't fare so well. I don't think he's out of politics, but he may be unseated as prime minister with that. They may lose their majority. I talked a little bit about that in the event with Matilda. If you missed that, that is available in my Patreon shop. So June is a little wild. I mean, we start off the month with Jupiter trine Pluto. We've got Mercury ingressing into Gemini on the 3rd, and Mercury will be trine Pluto. I'm very sure that's drones or missiles or something. Not at the United States necessarily, but we could even hear about incidents with individual drones or drones used in robberies or police drones, or it's going to be kind of all over the headlines. We will have Venus conjunct the Sun on June 4th. That's kind of some nice energy. I'll talk about that on next week's podcast and how to use that. We get the new moon in Gemini on the 6th. Venus is square Saturn, and Mars moves into Taurus on June 8th. And this things start to get very stubborn, very intense, very deliberate. Then June 9th, we have the Sun square Saturn. June 11th, Mars is square Pluto. June 12th, Mercury square Saturn. June 14th, Mercury conjunct Sun. June 16th, Venus ingress Cancer, Venus square Neptune. June 17th, Mercury ingress Cancer, Mercury square Neptune. That's all going to be something. And then we have the summer solstice on the 20th. That is when the Sun ingresses into Cancer. June 20th, we will also see the Sun square Neptune. June 21st, we have the full moon in Capricorn. Now, this is really interesting. We've got a full moon in Capricorn June 21st, and we have one on July 21st. The one in June is at the very beginning of the sign, and the one in July is at the end of the sign. In fact, it happens hours after my solar return, which I found very interesting, personally. And then June 26th, we have Mercury trine Saturn. That could be very interesting. And then June 29th, we have Saturn stationing retrograde. That is not a bad thing, and I will keep you up to date on all of that. So that's what's up in June. It's building the energy towards July, which is exceptionally volatile. Okay. It just is. So if you want to know what's going to happen this week, you can tune into the Patron only podcast. Part 2 will come up today as well. I will have that recorded and ready to go for you in the afternoon. I'll let you listen to this in the morning, and you can catch part 2 in the afternoon, Monday, May 27th. All right, let's look at some questions submitted by patrons. I love it. I love it when people submit the questions. Let's see. Oh, Riley asks, how do you know if you're having an awakening? That's a really good question. Because do you know when you're having an awakening? I think for some people are born awake. Okay. They're just born more aware. So what is an awakening? I think before we can say, how do you know you're having one? What is an awakening? I think we can have multiple awakenings. We can have awakenings to where we wake up to social matters, cultural matters, political matters. And then when it comes to spiritual awakenings, where we start to realize there's kind of more to life than we were told. Maybe when we think certain things, synchronicities show up. And is that when you're really waking, or is it like a waking dream, right? So I think the waking up is when you just realize, oh, that is a thing. Yeah, it is a thing. There's more to this world than I thought so. And just like I was talking about, what a great question to end on, given what I talked about with the Vatican. There's so many rules around it, and we've been raised with these cultural ideas of what spirituality is and isn't, and everybody loves the rules, I talked a little bit about this last week, as well as, whatever you believe in, you believe in it. And so you can slip into that stream of consciousness, and so much fear is out there. And so we can have some spooky experiences. I know I have, but we can have some real loving peak experience moments that can be replicable. I think once you realize how connected you are to everything, then you stay pretty conscious. But the way I like to say it, we go to sleep every night, hopefully, and we wake up every morning. So it's not like there's a single awakening. There's new understandings. And so it's just kind of like when you meet somebody who's like recently achieved something or came to like an awareness of something. Everybody wants to wake everybody else up, which can be rude, and sleeping people do not like to be awakened. At least this Cancerian likes to get her sleep and gets kind of grouchy when people wake her up before she's ready to get up. It goes the same for spiritual awakenings. Your truth is your truth. Your beliefs are your beliefs. Not everybody has to believe the same. Okay, that's why I said I'll give my opinions. And if you're strong in your opinions, you won't care that I have my opinions. It's the people who need everybody to believe the same way or think the same way as them to feel safe that run into problems. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, the world is not a safe place. It's never been. But there's always encouragement and love, at least in my experience. And so it's, there can be signs. You might find you have abilities awaken. So maybe you start having lucid dreams, or your hands start getting really hot or buzzy, or you kind of go into an altered state without a substance. I had that happen back in 1999. My therapist was also an energy worker. I got really lucky because it wasn't like super common back then. And I was having a real hard time. Like, I couldn't remember anything good. I only remembered the bad stuff in my life. I knew logically good things had happened, but all I could remember was bad stuff. And all I could see was ugliness in the world. And I was raw and very, very sensitive. I'd been through a lot. And he gave me this exercise. I'll share it with you guys. He gave me this exercise and he said, well, don't you think their angels are hungry? And angels was a word that worked for me, metaphorically. And I was like, oh, I'd imagine so, because people are really mean. I just couldn't take the meanness out in the world. I was really raw, really done. And I kind of was seeing it everywhere because remember, I couldn't remember anything good. So I was stuck in this slipstream of thought where only bad stuff was going on. And I knew logically that was impossible. So I had enough in my belief system to go, wait, it can't be as bad as I'm seeing it, because I was busy catastrophizing, et cetera, et cetera. And I had lots of good reasons to. I'd seen some shit in life. I was bruised and beat, and inside, I was a mess. Okay. And hello, there's a reason I was seeing my therapist. And so he gave me this exercise, and when I went on the bus, and these people were being grouchy and rude to each other, and it was just, and so I thought of what he said, and I sat there, and I was like, because I'd asked, well, what do you feed angels? He's like, feed them some love. I'm like, well, I can do that. Why not? It doesn't cost me anything to think kind thoughts, right? Which, of course, was an inroad to shifting my perspective so I could see something besides bad stuff, right? So I fed their angels. I just thought, I visualized a worn out, bedraggled guardian angel being, worn out, which do they really look like that? No. I just imagined it and then sent love from my heart to them. And all of a sudden, the world got really quiet and my consciousness expanded and I felt very disembodied. And this is kind of related to some of the stuff I was talking about in the mystery school video I did this week, where, when you have overdeveloped upper chakras to the detriment of, underdeveloped or understimulated lower energy centers. And so, so the world kind of went away and everything was like the veil. I was in the veil. I was part of it. And, later on, I found out what that was, and he described it as something called samadhi, which is a Hindu term. It's also used in Buddhism, which is like death of the ego. And it's not really death of the ego. We don't really kill our egos, but it's a taming of the ego, where you recognize you're connected to everything. And the problem is it left me really disembodied and very floaty, and I had toddlers to raise. And so the next week I came back and like, dude, I don't know what's going on, but now I'm totally disembodied and I see the good in everybody, and that's great. But I got kids to raise, and I got a toddler and I've got a 5-year-old. And he was like, go look it up. And he gave me just terms to research at the library. He didn't want to influence me. I went and I looked it up and I'm like, Next week I came back. I'm like, okay, how do we control this? Because I can't afford to be disembodied. This isn't working for me. He's like, Laurie, people work a lifetime to be able to do this. I'm like, that's great. I have kids to raise. So how do I stay in my body? So that was an awareness that happened, right? We can cause one, right? Just like a sound can wake you up out of your sleep. It's a new understanding. Did I have all the wisdom of everything in the world? No, I did not. I had an experience. Okay. And it led to gaining other experiences. My thought was, well, I chose to be in a physical body and I need to be in that physical body. So how do I bring that awareness inside? Okay. And that's a lot of what's in the mystery school. So you may well, Riley, given all the work you've done in there, you may well be having awakenings where maybe you are connecting to nature spirits, or maybe you are. I don't know what your particular symptoms are. You can integrate this into your daily life. You don't have to throw off the world. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to, we don't have to completely radically throw everything away. We can come into a new awareness and a new understanding of how things work. Period. And we're designed for this as human beings. There's nothing supernatural about it. We really are designed to have this connectivity with the universe. So that would be it. So some of the signs for an awakening, you could have different kinds of dreams than you normally have. You could be seeing synchronicities. You might feel physical sensations. Your intuition is working much stronger. It just really depends on the person. You might have teachers come into your realm. You might be drawn to certain subject matter. You might find you have a new special interest. You may, and sometimes waking up is painful. Like when we wake up to political matters or the power imbalances in the world, or even when I had that experience, it was painful insofar as when I felt so much connectivity, I realized how disconnected I had been. And so there was a little grief with that, like, oh my God, I'd been missing out on this deep connection. To me, that's more egotistical than anything. Like, oh my God, I should have been here before. No, you got there when you got there. The universe isn't keeping the score. Okay. So be easy on yourselves, but feel free to ask me more questions in the Mystery School Patreon chat. We still have the Discord, but I'm trying to think of another way to service it. All right. Let's see. Lissa. Hi, Laurie. I hope you're having a good week. I was wondering if you can discuss what intentions we set during the new moon plays out with the corresponding full moon, like Aries new moon to Aries full moon. I might be confused a bit, to be honest, so I don't know if I'm wording this right. Yeah. So when we look at intentions and how we set intentions, you have to understand, it's like planting a seed, right? So seeds germinate over time. If you look on a seed packet, it'll say like 72 days to maturity. So when we're setting intentions around the theme that we are setting intentions on, so as like wherever that new moon fell in your chart, okay, remember transits happen outside the wheel, okay? So when we set intentions for that, so this new moon in Gemini coming up, wherever that new moon is falling in your chart, okay, if you look outside the chart, you have to know what degree it is. Then you're going to set intentions for the energy of that house, right? And it'll be around that theme. Okay, so I'm setting intentions methodically for that. And then you'll look for it in the corresponding full moon 6 months later. And this is where you want to journal, because you may not remember the intentions you set every single month, right? We have a lot that happens in our lives. That's why it's good to journal it. So we can set intentions and then kind of record. But you have to be kind of like not holding it exactly, like not going, oh, this is the only way it can happen, you know? So if you set intentions for growth, if you set intentions to be more mindful, if you set intentions to let more good in your life or to rework your mindset, those are all good things to set in a Gemini new moon. Then you might want to track your progress over time and see. I think a lot of times people are like, I want the car. Maybe you will have a new car. Okay. How it gets there may be another story. Okay. I once needed a new car, and it wasn't in my budget. It wasn't in my budget. And I had a car, but I kind of needed a new car. And rodents got into my car. I did not invite them into my car. I did not ask them to get into my car. But insurance covers that. So I ended up with a new car. That happens. I also had, there was another one. Oh, one time, and when was that? That was like 2012 or 2013. Jupiter was in Gemini at that time. It might have been on my Venus. And I had an old smartphone, like a Palm Pixie or Palm Pilot or something like that. And I was teaching how to use Facebook to a bunch of entrepreneurs. I said, man, I need a new phone. And right then and there, like the next time I put it down very gently, and when I picked it up, the screen was completely shattered. I was like, oh, like I didn't drop it or anything. I was like, well, that was quick. That's those instant manifestations we all want. That was a costly one, however. It was a costly manifestation. But the new car thing was fun, and that happened over time. But those are rarer. Those are rare, but we can see lots of cool stuff show up depending on how open we are to how it happens. Okay? I hope that made sense. But just journal. Just keep track. And then you'll see. The more refined you get and the more you can let go of how things happen or the outcome itself. Because, people will be like, I want a new job, but then they'll be like, it has to be this. You narrow things down too much. One of the best jobs I ever got, I didn't want. One of my most favorite jobs I ever had, I did not want. And it ended up being one of the best places I ever worked for, one of the best positions I ever had. Not money-wise, believe it or not money-wise, but just it was one of the most secure spaces I ever got to be in. Really cool people to work with, people who were really switched on, people who were mission driven. Back in the 90s, it was very, very cool. And I did everything I could to overqualify myself for that job because my ego was in the way. And the universe conspired. And it ended up being just the best place for me. So you kind of have to let go of stuff, and let things unfold. Have your power, but also be open to co-creating with the universe. That is kind of a and both thing. That was a great question, especially since we have a new moon coming up. Alrighty. Let's see. I'm gonna do another one or two. Katie. Hi, Laurie. I was wanting to know what energy Saturn trine Pluto gives off in personal and mundane astrology, especially at 0 degrees. So Saturn trine Pluto in personal astrology is going to be different than in mundane astrology. But that's a really good question because I think a lot of times people just assume trines are great. To me, it shows a natural authority, like you've got a lot of authority, but it could have also meant like in childhood, maybe there were some people, and it really depends on the signs. Okay. Now, this would be a natal placement. Okay. But if you're thinking of, like, I'm going to assume you're like a Scorpio Pluto, right? So if it was Pisces Saturn trine Scorpio Pluto on transit, then this would be very empowering and making you really have to understand your own power and kind of forcing you to transform. And it could be that there's just structures and life stuff going on that's forcing you to kind of step into your own power and realize, that you've got this. It can be a very empowering transit. It can be kind of heavy too. It can be a lot of energy, but it's a kind of where you find out what you're made of, right? On a mundane level, it just depends on the houses involved, but Saturn trine Pluto tends to be a lot of at the base level, it's kind of authoritarianism, like power dynamics kind of get out of balance. There's a lot of heavy-handedness with that. That was a good question. I think I'll do one more and then I'll answer more on the Patron only podcast. Let's see. This is from Lisa. Hi, Laurie. I unfortunately have a couple of friends who still like the Orange Man and will blindly vote for him this fall, no matter which news articles I send them attempting to open their eyes. Unified Reich ideology to infringe upon women's rights, etc. My logical side knows this time shall pass and the Orange's astrology isn't looking good, but my heart is furious with them for being so ignorant. In lighter times, it's easier to be accepting of differing opinions, but I'm finding it so hard right now. Do you have any life advice on how to navigate this in friendships? I'm sorry, this isn't a true astro question. You know what? I love life advice questions. You guys can ask me anything. It could be metaphysical. And this is astrological. It is, because that's the times we're in. And we've got Jupiter in Gemini. And it is kind of a time of fracturing or beliefs that are differing. And so here's the deal. It's not our job to wake people up. And so as much as they want to control other people through rules and laws, or they just want to support them because they've dug their heels in, us trying to control what other people believe and see is kind of equally, it's the same energy. It doesn't mean the morals are the same. Okay. We're not talking from a moral perspective, but this is kind of like an unconscious opposition, right? So it's fighting energy versus, blending energy. And so how I would deal with it with like close friends or good friends, is I would have just ground rules around what we talk about. So like my very, very best friend growing up since 6th grade, it holds diametrically opposed views to me in religion, philosophy, and politics most times. I don't think they're a Trump supporter, though. I think they have shared values with the religious right, however. And this was difficult to navigate as kids, especially because we came from those very different species. In fact, we didn't even like each other when we were like 10 and 11 for no reason. We didn't know anything about each other. We just didn't like each other. And then we got put in choir together and we got stood next to each other and our voices blended. And we were like, we blended really well. And as 12-year-olds will do, we took that as a sign. And then when we were 14, we started reading Louis L'Amour books. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the author Louis L'Amour, but he wrote kind of these Old West novels, and he wrote some about the Civil War. And we were about like 13. It was the summer. And the reason we were reading them is we both devoured books. We were both big readers. And we both liked historical novels. You know, it was that or Harlequins, you know. And not that we didn't read other serious stuff, but this was our mind candy. And we were reading through this one series he wrote that was about the Civil War. And we sat there. Now, we were very close at this point. We knew everything about the other person. We knew about their struggles. We knew each other's humanity. Okay? We knew each other's humanity. We did not believe the same way. We didn't agree on things. She liked Reagan. I couldn't stand him. She was all about obedience and submission, and I was all like, F yous and, you know, change up the system. And so Rage Against the Machine wasn't around yet. So, but anyway, as we were reading these stories, one day, and I'll never forget it, I can see exactly, we're sitting in her bedroom. And we looked up at each other out of the books, and this dawning realization that we would be on opposite sides. Because I actually came from an abolitionist family. Like, I grew up with my great-great-great-grandfather's books on the abolitionist movement in the family library, which the family library was like a couple bookshelves. But we had books from my family. I had family stories about a family member walking from Oregon and hitching rides out to upstate New York to join the New York militia. They had purposely not owned slaves, right? They had a lot of kids and they mistreated their kids. It's not like they were total humanitarians, but they did not believe in that. And her family came from a very different background. And instead of arguing all the points, knowing that we were never going to agree, we saw each other's humanity. And we started to cry. Because we were reading about these like really intense things where people's houses were being raided and people were getting hurt. And I looked at her and I said, if a civil war ever happens, I want you to be safe. And she said the same thing. And we were sobbing, like to the point where her mom came in the room and was like, what is going on? And we're like, we'd be on opposite sides in a war, but we promise we'll keep each other safe. I mean, we were very dramatic about it. And that has stayed with me. That two 13-year-olds who had vastly different beliefs, who were diametrically opposed on many things, could see the humanity in each other and say, I don't want you to get hurt, and leave the rest. Now, she and I call each other for Christmas and birthdays, and did we go on our separate ways in life, and do we have other friends? Of course we did. We grew up, right? But we're more like sisters, and to this, and we have helped each other in life. I wouldn't have got back to the States without it. So it's really what is important about the friendship. And for some people, ideals matter. So for some people, there is no agree to disagree. I'm honestly going to say, I don't have too many friends who like Trump. I have one friend who does, but that friend was not born in the States. English is their second language. They come from a cultural background where just if you say communism, they're like on edge because of their family history. And they don't they don't understand the history or the repercussions. They're looking at it from a different angle. Okay. And that's one of the things he does, is he does prey on ignorance. Did that end my friendship with that person? No, but I did say we weren't talking about politics anymore, because they would try to argue the Constitution. I'm like, that's not in the Constitution. Like, you're arguing something you haven't read. Go read it. You haven't read in a while. That's not what that means. So I do it on a case by case basis. And so, are these really your friends? And what do you value about them? Okay. What do you value about them? Where do you want to put your energy? Can you see the humanity? Because when we start dehumanizing people, are they capable of seeing things in a different way? And what happens when you come directly at somebody with fact is you get cognitive dissonance. And so sometimes, telling stories, about, poor woman with an ectopic pregnancy, being charged for murder or something, But unfortunately, for some people, it takes things happening to them before they wake up. Some people are light sleepers. Other people, well, they're pretty dead to the world. So you have to ask yourself, this is, how do I navigate this? What do I want to see in them? How close am I to them? How does this friendship enrich my life? And I would put my energy into people who are more rewarding in some ways. So it is easier in lighter times, isn't it? But sometimes things happen. So like my friend Chrissy, who I went to high school or middle school and high school with, she became less conservative after her husband served in Iraq under Bush because of the repercussions. That was a really sad way to have awarenesses made. Her husband didn't die, but he came back messed up. So sometimes that's just how it goes. So we have to ask ourselves, is this a real friendship, and what do I value about these people? And it's kind of like feeding the angels. Like when I was talking to Riley here, just a little bit, don't do it to change them, but just be like, send them some love. Send them some love. They're afraid of something if they're really into him. Okay. Man, I think that's a good place to end it. Don't you guys? Send them some love. And it's hard when you want people to just pull their heads out of their butts, right? We would love people to just pull their heads out of their butts. Could they please stop being, I get it. It's frustrating. But our perceptions shape our reality, Our perceptions shape our reality, and right now we really do need to see the shared humanity in one another. I have an interview that's going to be on the podcast next week with a wonderful community activist and podcaster, Kendall Ford, and she is the beautiful voice and brains at the Deep Space podcast. She's all about seeing shared humanity. Not without consequence, but we have a great conversation about it. Yeah. So you guys can listen in on that. But I would just be like, what do I find valuable about these people? And there's no waking anybody up at this point. And you never know, he's going to lose most of his supporters coming up in June and July. So he has a really shitty summer. Little schadenfreude for you. And you can go watch the video on my Patreon that I did recently last week, where I updated the Trump predictions, looked at Biden too. Just don't come at me like, what about Biden? Yeah, I don't like him either, okay? So What can we do, man? What can we do? But I go through their astrology, I look at Alito's astrology, and I get you more ready for October. I'm going to keep gently bringing that information out. So be safe, my friends. Pay attention to the weather. And catch part 2 to find out more about what's going to be in the headlines and more coming up in June here at the Awake Space Astrology Podcast.